He bought an abandoned farm, but when he returned, 2 women were already there. Daniel James Thompson clenched his fist so tightly that his nails left marks on his palm. The lawyer had just confirmed what he already knew. Nothing was left. 5 years building the construction company, 15 employees depending on him, million-dollar contracts. Everything had gone up in smoke when he discovered that his partner, Richard Wilson, had embezzled all the company's funds. That's when he saw the online auction ad, a 50-hectare farm in rural Virginia, near the town of 3 Rivers. The price was too low, almost suspicious, but Daniel had no choice. With the last savings he managed to hide before the bankruptcy. He placed the bid and won. The property would be his fresh start, far from the city that had witnessed his ruin. The moving truck traveled down the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of red dust. Daniel drove his car right behind it, his hands sweating on the steering wheel. He had spent 3 weeks organizing the paperwork and preparing the move. The farm was 4 hours from Chicago, in a rural area where he could rebuild his life away from pitying looks and whispers about his bankruptcy. When he finally spotted the property, Daniel's heart raced. The main house was an old wooden and brick structure, with a wide porch and a red clay tile roof. In the background, he could see a large barn and some smaller sheds. Everything seemed well maintained, not abandoned as he expected given the price he had paid. But it was as he approached that Daniel had his first surprise. On the porch of the main house, 2 young women were sitting in rocking chairs. They were identical twins, with straight brown hair tied in low ponytails and wearing simple light-colored clothes. One of them held a cup of coffee. The other was knitting what appeared to be a coat. Daniel stopped the car abruptly, causing the moving truck to stop behind him. Both women stood up and walked toward the gate, where Daniel was already getting out of the vehicle with the purchase documents in hand. "Good afternoon," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "My name is Daniel James Thompson. I bought this property in an online auction 3 weeks ago." The woman holding the knitting took a step forward. She had light green eyes and a serious expression. "Mr. Daniel, my name is Emily Grace Roberts. This is my twin sister, Olivia Faith Roberts." She paused and looked directly into his eyes. "You may have the purchase papers, but this farm belongs to us." Daniel felt his stomach churn. It couldn't be. He had checked all the documentation, paid all the auction fees. "What do you mean it belongs to you?" he asked, showing the papers. "I have all the legal purchase documents here." Olivia, who had remained silent until then, stepped closer. "Mr. Daniel, we've lived here for over 15 years. We've taken care of this land since we were teenagers. Mr. Anthony Parker, who was the previous owner, left us a will promising this farm to whoever cared for it until his passing." "A will?" Daniel felt his legs go weak. "What will?" The auction didn't mention anything about heirs or pending wills. Emily took a deep breath and gestured for him to follow her to the porch. "Dear sir, let's talk calmly." Her voice had a maternal tone that contrasted with her youthful appearance. "Send the truck away for today. We have a lot to explain." Daniel signaled for the truck driver to wait. He didn't know if he should trust the 2 women, but he needed to understand what was happening before unloading his furniture onto a property that might not be his. On the porch, Emily poured fresh coffee into blue ceramic cups. Olivia sat beside her sister, and Daniel noticed how they moved in sync, as if reading each other's thoughts. "Mr. Anthony was our godfather," began Emily. "When our parents died in a car accident 15 years ago, he took us in here. We were only 19 at the time. He never married, never had children," continued Olivia. "He always said this farm would be ours when he passed away. We took care of everything. The coffee plantation, the vegetable garden, the animals. This land lives because of our work." Daniel took a sip of coffee. It was strong and flavorful, clearly made with beans from the farm itself. "Where is this will?" he asked. The sisters exchanged a meaningful glance. "That's the problem," admitted Emily. "Mr. Anthony kept all the important documents in a safe, but he never told us where the key was. When he passed away 6 months ago, we searched the whole house but couldn't find it. And without the key, we couldn't open the safe to find the will," added Olivia. Daniel felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because maybe the situation could be resolved. Frustration because his life was already too complicated. "Do you have any proof that you lived here all these years?" he asked. Emily stood up and went to an old sideboard on the porch. From there, she took a shoebox full of photographs. "We have hundreds of photos from the last 15 years, she said, spreading some on the coffee table. "Here we are planting coffee during the 2010 harvest. This one is from when we repaired the barn roof in 2015, and this one is from Mr. Anthony's birthday party last year." Daniel examined the photos. It was impossible to deny that the two women had indeed lived on that farm for years. In every image, the property was well maintained, with organized crops and buildings in good condition. "What about the auction?" he asked. "How was that possible if you have a right to the property?" Olivia lowered her head. "When Mr. Anthony passed away, his family from the city showed up wanting to settle the estate. They're distant cousins who never set foot here, but since we didn't have documents to prove our rights, they managed to get the farm auctioned off. We tried to hire a lawyer," said Emily, "but we didn't have enough money. We worked on the farm, but never received an official salary. Mr. Anthony took care of everything and gave us what we needed." Daniel leaned back in the rocking chair, feeling the weight of yet another problem in his already shattered life. "And now?" he asked. "I paid for the farm legally. You claim to have rights to it but can't prove it. What do we do?" "You seem like a good person," said Emily. "Maybe we can find a solution that works for all of us." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Olivia stood up and pointed to the barn. "You can stay in the barn while we sort this out. We've set up a comfortable space there. It's large and even has its own bathroom." Daniel looked in the direction she pointed. The barn was indeed large and seemed to be in good condition. "How long do you think it will take to resolve this?" "It depends on finding the safe key," said Emily, "or finding another way to open it. If there really is a will inside, everything will be resolved." Daniel thought about his options. Going back to the city meant facing creditors, pitying looks, the humiliation of having lost everything. Staying there, even temporarily, would give him time to think about his next move. "All right," he said finally. "I'll stay in the barn for a few weeks while we try to sort this out. But I need to make it clear that I paid for this property and have legal documents proving my ownership." "We understand perfectly," said Emily, "and we respect that. We just ask that you also understand our situation." The moving truck was instructed to unload Daniel's things in the barn. The sisters helped organize the space, showing where the bathroom was, how the wood stove worked, and where he could cook his meals. During the first few days, Daniel kept a respectful distance from the two women. He spent his mornings walking around the property, getting to know every corner, every building. The farm was indeed well cared for. The coffee crops were healthy, there was a productive vegetable garden behind the house, and some animals, chickens, 2 pigs, and a milk cow, that clearly received good care. In the afternoon, he locked himself in the barn and tried to think of alternatives. He called lawyers in Chicago, researched land possession rights, and tried to figure out how to get out of that situation without losing what little remained of his savings. It was on one of these afternoons that he heard raised voices coming from the main house. Through the barn window, he saw a black car parked in front of the house and 2 men in suits talking with the sisters on the porch. Daniel couldn't resist his curiosity. He approached the house, trying to listen to the conversation. "You have 15 days to leave," said one of the men who was holding a folder of documents. "The new owner has every legal right to this property." "We've already explained our situation," replied Emily, visibly nervous. "We have rights to this land." "Rights that you cannot prove, Das," countered the other man. "There is no will registered with the county clerk. You are illegally occupying private property." Olivia, who had been silent until then, approached the men. "Who are you?" she asked. "And what interest do you have in this farm?" "We are representatives of the law firm Morris & Associates," said the first man. "We were hired by Mr. Richard Wilson to resolve pending issues regarding this property." Daniel felt his blood run cold. Richard Wilson, his former partner. The man who had destroyed his company was somehow involved with the farm he had bought. "Richard Wilson?" said Emily. "We've never heard that name." Mr. Wilson is interested in acquiring this property, explained the second lawyer. He is willing to pay a generous amount for the property, well above what was paid at the auction. Daniel came out of his hiding spot and walked toward the porch. "Gentlemen," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I am Daniel James Thompson, the current legal owner of this farm. If you have any proposal to make, you should speak with me." The two lawyers looked him up and down. "Mr. Daniel," said the first, "our client is willing to pay you $300,000 for this property. It's a very generous offer." Daniel did the math quickly. He had paid $80,000 for the farm at the auction. $300,000 would be almost 4 times the amount invested. "Why is your client so interested in this specific farm?" he asked. "That is not for us to disclose," replied the second lawyer. "We are only relaying the offer. You have 48 hours to decide." The men handed over a business card and left, leaving a tense atmosphere on the porch. Emily approached Daniel. "Do you know this Richard Wilson?" Daniel sighed heavily. "Unfortunately, I do. Richard was my partner in the construction company I had in Chicago. He's the one who stole everything from me, forced the fraudulent bankruptcy that brought me here." The sisters exchanged a worried look. "And now he wants to buy exactly the farm you purchased to start over," observed Olivia. "That can't be a coincidence." Daniel shook his head. "It's not a coincidence. Richard has always been strategic in everything he did. If he wants this farm, it's because he has some plan for it, and I can guarantee it's nothing good." "What are we going to do?" asked Emily. Daniel looked at the two women who in just a few days had become his only allies in another battle against Richard Wilson. "We'll find out why he wants this farm so badly," he said, "and we'll make sure he doesn't lay a hand on it." That night, the three gathered in the main house's kitchen to have dinner and plan. Olivia had prepared a free-range chicken with polenta, and the aroma filled the entire house. "Do you know of any development projects for this area?" asked Daniel as they ate. "Not that I'm aware of," replied Emily. "It's a very rural area, just small farms and family properties." "Wait," said Olivia, putting down her fork. "A few months ago, before Mr. Anthony left, some men showed up here asking about the land. They wanted to know about the property's water resources." "Water resources?" "Yes," Olivia continued. "This farm has 3 water springs and is very close to the region's main river. The men specifically asked about that." Daniel reflected on the information. "That would explain the interest. Land with abundant water resources is worth much more, especially if someone is planning a large venture in the area." "What kind of venture?" "It could be anything," said Daniel. "A resort, a luxury condominium, an industrial complex. Richard has always had connections with big construction companies and real estate developers." Emily stood up and went to a kitchen drawer. From there, she pulled out a yellowed envelope. "I found this among Mr. Anthony's things," she said, handing the envelope to Daniel. "It's correspondence with a company called Virginia Regional Development." Daniel opened the envelope and read the letters. They were purchase proposals for the farm, all signed by Richard Wilson as the company's representative. "He's been trying to buy this farm directly from Mr. Anthony for over a year," said Daniel. "And from what I see here, Mr. Anthony always refused the offers." "He never told us about these letters," said Olivia. "Probably didn't want to worry you," suggested Daniel. "But this proves that Richard was already interested in the property even before the auction." Emily took the letters and examined them carefully. "Mr. Daniel," she said, her voice serious, "what happens if Richard gets this farm? Knowing him as I do, you two will be thrown out of here immediately. And whatever his project is, it will destroy the rural environment of this region." The three remained silent for a few minutes, absorbing the weight of the situation. "We have to find the key to that safe," Olivia finally said. "It's our only chance to prove our rights to this land." "And meanwhile, we need to buy time," added Daniel. "I won't sell to Richard, no matter how much he offers." "Even if it means losing the chance to recover some of the money he stole from you?" asked Emily. Daniel looked through the kitchen windows, seeing the rural landscape illuminated by the full moon. "Emily, when I lost everything in the city, I thought my life was over. I came here desperate, just wanting to escape. But these last few days have made me realize something." "What?" That maybe this farm isn't just my fresh start. Maybe it's our fresh start. You two also have the right to start over, to have a stable life after years of taking care of this land with nothing guaranteed. Olivia wiped a tear that was running down her face. Are you willing to help us, even without being sure if we have legal rights here? I am, Daniel answered without hesitation. Because the law isn't just what's written on paper. The law is also about justice, and it would be a terrible injustice if you lost this farm after caring for it for 15 years. The next morning, the three began a systematic search for the safe key. They checked every drawer, every piece of furniture, every corner of the house where Mr. Anthony could have hidden the key. It was Emily who suggested checking the least obvious places. He always said that the most important things should be kept in places where no one would think to look, she recalled. They spent hours searching the attic, the basement, even the chicken coop and the pig pen. Nothing. What if the key is buried somewhere on the property? Daniel suggested. 50 acres is a lot of land to search for a small key, Olivia replied, discouraged. It was then that Emily had an idea. The orchard, she said. Mr. Anthony spent hours every day in the orchard. He said it was his place for reflection. The orchard was behind the main house, with about 100 fruit trees, mango, orange, lemon, and some jaboticaba trees. In the center there was a wooden bench under a century-old jaboticaba tree. He always sat on this bench in the late afternoon, Olivia remembered. He would stay here until dark. Daniel examined the bench carefully. It was a rustic piece made of thick wooden planks. Running his hand under the seat, he felt something different. There's something here, he said, bending down to get a better look. There was a small metal box nailed to the underside of the bench, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. We found it, Emily shouted excitedly. Daniel managed to detach the little box. Inside was a small key and a folded paper. Olivia took the paper and read aloud. Emily and Olivia, if you're reading this, it means I've already passed. The safe key was always here in the place where I came to talk with you every day, even when you weren't present. In the safe, you'll find everything you need to know about this land, and about you two. Take care of each other as you've always taken care of me and this farm. With love, Godfather Anthony. The two sisters cried in each other's arms. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest, seeing the emotion of the two women who had lost the only father figure they'd ever known. The safe was in the main bedroom of the house, inside an old closet. It was a heavy iron piece clearly made to last generations. With trembling hands, Emily inserted the key into the lock. The safe opened with a metallic click. Inside were several documents, some old jewelry, a little money, and at the bottom a sealed envelope with the names Emily and Olivia handwritten. Olivia carefully opened the envelope. Inside were 2 birth certificates, a notarized will, and a long letter written by Mr. Anthony. My God, Emily whispered, reading the certificates. These aren't our original birth certificates. Daniel looked over their shoulders. How are they different? Our real names aren't Roberts, Olivia said, her voice trembling. They're Emily Parker Roberts and Olivia Parker Roberts. Parker? Daniel noticed the coincidence. Like Mr. Anthony. Emily picked up the letter and began reading aloud. My dear daughters, yes, daughters. The time has come for you to know the truth I've kept all these years to protect you. You're not just my goddaughters. You're my biological daughters, the fruit of the love I had with Mary Miller, who worked as a maid on this farm for 2 years. The two sisters looked at each other in total shock. Daniel felt he should give them privacy, but Emily signaled for him to stay. Please keep reading, Olivia requested, trembling too much to hold the paper. Emily continued. Mary was a wonderful woman, hard-working and honest. We fell in love, but she got pregnant during a time when society still didn't accept relationships between employer and employee, especially when there was a social class difference. To protect Mary and you two, we made up the story that you were daughters of distant relatives of hers who had died in an accident. He invented a whole story to protect us, whispered Emily. Mary moved to the city when you were born. I paid an allowance for you 3, visited whenever I could, but we kept up the pretense. When you were 15, Mary was actually involved in a car accident. That's when I brought you here permanently, pretending you were my goddaughters. Daniel began to understand why the two women felt so at home on that farm. It was literally their father's house. Emily continued reading. This farm was always meant for you two. You are my only heirs. The will you'll find with this letter is registered at the courthouse and is legally valid. Forgive me for not telling the truth while I was alive, but I was afraid it would change our relationship. You were always the daughters I loved most in my life. When Emily finished reading, the silence in the room was absolute. Only the sound of the two sisters' sobs broke the quiet. Daniel felt like an intruder in such an intimate moment. He stood up to leave the room, but Olivia held his arm. "Please stay," she asked. "You're part of this story now." Emily picked up the will and began examining the legal details. "It's all here," she said. "The farm is rightfully ours. The will was registered 3 years ago at the Three Rivers Courthouse." "But how did it end up in auction then?" asked Daniel. "Probably the nephews who organized the auction didn't know about this will," replied Olivia, "or they knew and deliberately hid the information." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Daniel thought about the legal implications of the situation. "If the will is valid, that means my purchase at the auction was irregular," he said. "The farm shouldn't have gone to auction." "What does that mean?" asked Emily. "It means you are the legitimate owners, and I can sue whoever organized the auction to get my money back," explained Daniel. Olivia approached him. "Mr. Daniel, you helped us discover the truth about our family. You defended us against Richard Wilson's lawyers. We're not just going to kick you out of here." "Olivia is right," agreed Emily. "This farm is too big for two people, and you've shown that you're an honest and hard-working person." Daniel looked at the two women who had become much more than just his opponents in a land dispute. "What are you proposing?" "A partnership," said Emily. "You understand business, we understand the land. Together we can make this farm truly prosper." "And what about my money invested in the purchase?" "We'll use part of this year's harvest to reimburse you," suggested Olivia. "Or if you prefer, you can consider that amount as your initial share in the partnership." Daniel felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Absolutely," replied Emily. "But first we need to resolve the Richard Wilson situation. He won't give up easily when he finds out the farm has legal owners." They spent the rest of the day organizing the documents and planning the next steps. Daniel called a lawyer in Chicago, explained the situation, and scheduled a meeting to formalize the sisters' ownership of the farm and register the partnership between the three of them. The next day, as expected, Richard's representatives returned to the farm. This time they came with 3 cars and more people, including a court officer. Emily and Olivia greeted them on the porch along with Daniel. On the coffee table, all the documentation was organized. "Gentlemen," said Daniel, before any of them could speak, "I have here the documentation that proves this farm legally belongs to Ms. Emily and Olivia Parker Roberts, daughters and sole heirs of Mr. Anthony Parker." The lead attorney picked up the documents and examined them carefully. "This will need to be validated in court," he said, trying to maintain authority in his voice. "It already has been," replied Daniel, handing over a certificate. "Validated 3 years ago at the Three Rivers Courthouse. The auction that resulted in my purchase was irregular, based on false information about the existence of heirs." The court officer, who had remained silent, stepped forward. "May I see the documentation?" he asked. After examining all the papers, he nodded. "The documentation is in order," he confirmed. "The will is valid and takes precedence over any subsequent sale." Richard's representatives exchanged glances, clearly displeased. "Our client won't accept this easily," said one of them. "Your client can sue whomever he wants," replied Daniel. "But he has no claim to this property." After the lawyers left, Daniel, Emily, and Olivia celebrated in the kitchen with a special coffee that Olivia had saved for important occasions. "They thought they had gotten rid of Richard," said Daniel, "but I know him too well. This is far from over." As if it were a premonition, the next morning Daniel was awakened by loud voices coming from the main house. Through the barn window, he saw 2 trucks parked in front of the house and several men talking animatedly with the sisters. He quickly dressed and ran to the house. "What's going on?" he asked Emily, who was visibly nervous. "They say they're from the Regional Water and Sewer Company," she replied. "They came to test the springs for contamination." Daniel approached the man who seemed to be in charge of the group. "What kind of test?" "Potability and flow analysis," replied the man, showing some documents. "We received a complaint that this property is contaminating the regional groundwater." "A complaint from whom?" "That's confidential, sir." Daniel examined the documents. They looked official, but something wasn't right. "Do you have a court order to enter the property?" he asked. The man hesitated for a moment. "We don't need a court order for preventive environmental analysis." "Actually, you do," said Daniel. "This is private property, and you need authorization from the owners or a court order to conduct any kind of analysis." Emily approached Daniel. "What do we do?" "We ask them to leave and come back with the proper documentation." The group leader became irritated. "Sir, we're talking about a serious environmental issue. If the springs are contaminated, it could affect the entire region." "Then you shouldn't have any trouble getting a court order," Daniel retorted. "Until then, I ask that you leave the property." After a few minutes of discussion, the men withdrew, but not before taking several photos of the property. "Richard is trying to find some way to force you to sell," Daniel told the sisters. "He'll probably invent environmental issues, documentation problems, anything to make it inconvenient for you to keep the farm. Can he do that?" "He can try," replied Daniel. "But now we're prepared. I'll hire a lawyer specializing in rural issues to defend us." Olivia, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "There's something I haven't told you," she said, her voice hesitant. Emily and Daniel looked at her expectantly. "Our father, Mr. Anthony, before leaving, told me there were more secrets hidden on this farm. He said if anyone ever tried to take us away from here, I should look where the sun rises for the family." "What does that mean?" asked Emily. "I never understood," admitted Olivia. "But now, with everything that's happening, I think we should find out." The three spent the afternoon trying to decipher the message. "Where the sun rises for the family." It was Daniel who had the idea. "The sun rises in the east," he said. "What's on the east side of the property?" "The house where our mother lived when we were little," replied Emily. "It was a small house that stood on the eastern boundary of the farm. It's been abandoned for years." "Let's go there," suggested Daniel. The small house stood on a hill about 2 kilometers from the main house. It was a simple structure with 2 bedrooms, brick walls, and a ceramic tile roof. Outside it was overgrown with weeds, but inside it was surprisingly well preserved. "Dad maintained this place," said Olivia. "He came here sometimes but never brought us along." They searched every room, every piece of furniture, every corner of the small house. In the main bedroom, Emily noticed that one of the floorboards was slightly misaligned. "Here," she said, pointing to the board. Daniel managed to lift it carefully. Underneath was a hollowed-out space in the ground, where a metal box was buried. Inside the box were more documents, some old photographs, and a letter addressed specifically to Olivia. Olivia opened the letter with trembling hands. "My dear Olivia, you've always been the more observant of the two. If you're reading this, it means you've discovered this hiding place. What I'm about to tell you only you can know, at least at first." Emily tried to read over her sister's shoulder, but Olivia hid the letter. "He says only I can know at first," she explained. "Let me read it alone first." Daniel and Emily respected her request and went to wait in the living room, while Olivia read the entire letter in the bedroom. When she came out 10 minutes later, she was pale. "What did the letter say?" asked Emily. "We have another brother," said Olivia in a faint voice. "What do you mean, another brother?" "Our father had a previous relationship with a woman from the city. They had a son before he met our mother. His name is Nathan Parker Miller." Daniel felt a chill. "Where is he?" "According to the letter, he lives in New York. Works for a real estate development company." Emily sat down heavily in a chair. "Why did Dad hide this from me?" "Because Nathan never knew that Dad was his father," explained Olivia. "His mother moved to New York pregnant and raised him alone, telling him his father had abandoned them." "And why didn't Dad look for his son?" because he was very young at the time, scared of the responsibility. When he wanted to go back and acknowledge paternity, he learned the woman had married another man who was raising Nathan as his own. Daniel reflected on the implications. If Nathan is Mr. Anthony's son, he also has a right to the inheritance. According to the letter, Dad tried to include Nathan in the will, but couldn't find him. His mother had changed her name after marriage, and he didn't know how to locate his son. "And why only Olivia should know this at first?" asked Emily, hurt. Olivia hesitated before answering, "Because Dad found out who employs Nathan in New York." "Who?" "Richard Wilson." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind in the trees around the small house. Daniel jumped to his feet. "Richard employs our half-brother," said Emily. "That can't be a coincidence." "It's not a coincidence," confirmed Olivia. "According to the letter, Dad started to suspect a few months ago. Richard didn't choose this farm at random. He knows that Nathan is the son of Anthony Parker, and he's probably using that as part of some bigger plan." Daniel started pacing back and forth, thinking quickly. "Richard has always been meticulous," he said. "If he found out about Nathan before we did, he might have told him about the inheritance. And if Nathan shows up now, claiming rights to the farm, he could force a sale," Emily finished, "especially if Richard convinces him he can make more money selling the property than keeping it," Olivia added. "What do we do?" asked Emily. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at the two sisters. "We're going to New York," he said. "We'll find Nathan before Richard tells him about the inheritance." "What if he already knows?" "Then we'll try to convince him it's better to keep the farm in the family than sell it to Richard." The next morning, the three of them set off for New York in Daniel's car. The 5-hour trip was tense, with each lost in their own thoughts about how to approach a brother who didn't know he had sisters. Olivia had gotten Nathan's address from the information left by their father. He lived in an apartment in Soho and worked for an urban development company in the city center. They arrived in New York in the late afternoon and decided to go directly to Nathan's home address, hoping to find him there. The building was modern, upper middle class. Nathan lived on the 8th floor. When they rang the bell, a male voice answered through the intercom. "Who is it?" Daniel looked at the sisters, who seemed frozen with nervousness. "My name is Daniel James Thompson," he said into the intercom. "I'm here with Emily and Olivia Roberts. We'd like to talk to you about Anthony Parker." There was a long pause before the response. "Anthony Parker." The voice sounded surprised. "Come up, apartment 84. In the elevator, Olivia held Emily's hand tightly. "What if he doesn't believe us?" she whispered. "What if he's a bad person like Richard?" added Emily. "We'll find out," said Daniel, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Nathan opened the apartment door before they even knocked. He was a man of about 35, tall, thin, with features that vaguely resembled the two sisters. He wore a light blue dress shirt and jeans. "Please come in," he said, studying the three visitors with curiosity. "You mentioned Anthony Parker. How did you know him?" Daniel, Emily, and Olivia exchanged glances, unsure where to begin. "It's a long story," said Daniel. "Maybe we should sit down to talk." Nathan led them to a simple but well-organized living room. He offered coffee, which everyone declined due to nervousness. "You first," said Nathan. "How did you know Anthony?" Emily took a deep breath and decided to get straight to the point. "Nathan, we are your sisters." Nathan let out a nervous laugh. "What do you mean, my sisters?" "I don't have any sisters. I'm an only child." Olivia stepped closer to him. "Anthony Parker was our father, and according to documents we found, he was your father too." The smile vanished from Nathan's face. "My father's name is John Lewis. My mother's name is Patricia Lewis. My name is Nathan Lewis Miller." "Parker Miller," Emily corrected gently. "Your mother's name was Patricia Parker before she married John Lewis." Nathan stood up abruptly. "What are you talking about? What kind of crazy story is this?" Daniel intervened, trying to calm the situation. "Nathan, I know this is shocking. We only found out the truth ourselves a few days ago. Your biological father, Anthony Parker, passed away 6 months ago and left a letter explaining the whole situation." "What letter?" Olivia took a copy of the letter Anthony had left about Nathan from her bag. She handed it to him carefully. Nathan read the letter in silence, his face growing paler and paler. When he finished, he sank heavily onto the couch. "My mother never told me any of this," he said in a weak voice. "According to the letter, she wanted to protect you," explained Emily, and Anthony respected her decision not to seek contact. "But why have you come looking for me now?" Daniel leaned forward. "Nathan, you work for Richard Wilson, correct?" "Yes, at his urban development company. Why?" "Richard was my partner until a few months ago. He destroyed my company through fraud and forced me into bankruptcy. Now he's trying to acquire the farm your father left to you three." Nathan shook his head, confused. "Richard never mentioned anything about a farm. And what's this story about my father, Anthony, leaving a farm to me?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Emily explained the whole situation. The discovery of the will, Richard's attempt to buy the farm, the partnership they had formed with Daniel. "Are you telling me I have a right to part of a farm?" asked Nathan. "1/3 of the property," confirmed Olivia. "Emily and I discovered we're Anthony's daughters, and now we've found out you're his son too." Nathan stood up and went to the window, looking out at the urban landscape of New York. "My whole life I believed my father had abandoned my pregnant mother," he said, without turning around. "I grew up hating a man I never even knew." "And now we've discovered he didn't abandon you," said Emily. "He respected your mother's decision and built his own life, but he never forgot you." Nathan turned to face the three of them. "And where does Richard fit into this story?" Daniel explained about the fraudulent bankruptcy, the attempts to buy the farm, the lawyers who had appeared with offers. "Richard always has ulterior motives," he concluded. "If he discovered about you before we did, he might be planning to use that information somehow." Nathan was thoughtful for a few minutes. "He mentioned a new project at the company a few weeks ago," he said finally. "A tourist complex in rural Virginia. Said it would be the company's biggest venture in the coming years." "Tourist complex?" Emily and Olivia exchanged glances. "Yes, a luxury resort with a golf course, spa, 5-star hotel. He said he'd found the perfect location with abundant water resources in a preserved rural area." Daniel felt his stomach turn. "Nathan, can you give us more details about this project?" "I don't know much. I just know he's very excited about it and mentioned it would be in the Three Rivers region." "Our farm is in Three Rivers," said Olivia. Nathan stopped pacing. "You think Richard wants the farm to build the resort there?" "I'm sure of it," replied Daniel. "And if he discovered you're an heir to the property before we did, he might be planning to manipulate you into forcing a sale." "How?" "By appearing as the generous employer who accidentally discovered your inheritance and helped you claim your rights. Then he'd convince you it's better to sell and split the money than to keep the farm." Nathan sat down again, seeming overwhelmed by all the information. "And what do you want from me?" "We want to get to know you," said Emily. "You're our brother. We lost our father without even knowing you existed. We don't want to waste any more time without knowing our family." "What about the farm?" "We want you to be part of it," said Olivia. "Not as a silent partner who just collects money, but as family. Come see the place where our father lived, where we grew up, where your roots are." Nathan looked at his two sisters and then at Daniel. "What if I want to sell my share?" "That's your decision," Daniel replied. "But at least come see the property before deciding. Learn about the history of you three, see what your father built, understand why Emily and Olivia dedicated 15 years of their lives caring for that land." Nathan stayed silent for a few minutes, clearly wrestling with conflicting emotions. "Can I visit the farm without committing to anything?" he finally asked. "Of course," Emily answered. "You can stay as long as you want, see everything, and then decide what's best for you." "When?" "How about now?" Olivia suggested. "We can return together today." Nathan looked at his watch. "It's almost 7 in the evening. I'll arrive very late at the farm." "You can stay here in New York tonight and we'll travel together early tomorrow," Daniel proposed. Nathan hesitated. "There's something you need to know," he said. "Richard scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning. Said he had a very interesting proposal to make related to the new project." Daniel, Emily, and Olivia exchanged glances. "What kind of proposal?" Daniel asked. "I don't know. He only said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for my career and that it could completely change my life." "Nathan," Daniel said with a serious tone, "I believe Richard discovered you're the heir to the farm and will reveal it tomorrow. But he'll do it in a way that makes you feel grateful to him and agree to sell the property." "But how could he have found out if not even you knew of my existence until a few days ago?" Olivia picked up their father's letter again. "It's written here that Dad hired a private investigator a few months ago to try to locate you. It's possible Richard found out about that investigation. Or the investigator himself might have sold the information to him," Emily suggested. Nathan stood up and went to a piece of furniture where he picked up a laptop. "Let me look up some things about Richard Wilson that you might not know." He spent a few minutes typing and reading information on the screen. "Here it says his company is developing several luxury resort projects in the interior of New York and Virginia," he said. "And here, interesting." "What?" "According to this business newspaper article, Richard has partnerships with international investment groups. They're looking for lands with abundant water resources to develop sustainable tourism complexes." Daniel shook his head. "Sustainable? Richard doesn't know the meaning of that word. If he gets his hands on your farm, he'll destroy the entire environment of the region." Nathan closed the laptop and looked at the three of them. "All right," he said. "I'll cancel the meeting with Richard and go with you to the farm. I want to understand this whole story better before making any decision." Emily and Olivia smiled for the first time since they had arrived in New York. "Are you sure?" Olivia asked. "I am. But before that, I want to call my mother and ask about Anthony Parker. She owes me this truth." Nathan picked up the phone and dialed a number. The sisters and Daniel only heard his side of the conversation. "Mom, I need to know something about my biological father." "No, not John. My biological father. Was his name Anthony Parker?" "Mom, please don't hang up. I have people here who told me things you never told me." "What do you mean you can't talk about this over the phone? Okay, then I'll come over now." He hung up the phone and turned to the other three. "My mother wants to talk in person. She lives 20 minutes from here. Can you come with me? I think she needs to meet you too." Nathan's mother's house was in a middle-class residential neighborhood. It was a simple, well-kept house with a small garden in front. Patricia Lewis welcomed them at the door. She was a woman about 55 years old, with graying hair, a tired but kind look in her eyes. "Nathan, what's this story on the phone?" she asked, looking suspiciously at her son's companions. "Mom, these are Emily and Olivia Roberts. They're my sisters. And this is Daniel James Thompson." Patricia turned pale and leaned against the wall. "What do you mean, your sisters?" Emily approached her. "Mrs. Patricia, we're daughters of Anthony Parker, the same Anthony Parker who's Nathan's father." Patricia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Come in," she said weakly. "Let's talk in the living room." The house was small but cozy, with simple furniture and many photographs of Nathan at different ages scattered across the walls. "Mum," said Nathan, sitting beside her on the sofa, "why did you never tell me the truth about my father?" Patricia looked at the two women sitting across from her. "You're really Anthony's daughters." "We are," confirmed Olivia, showing the birth certificate they'd found in the safe. Patricia examined the document and sighed. "I always knew he had other women," she said. "Anthony was a very charming man, but also very irresponsible when he was young." "Mrs. Patricia," said Emily, "according to the letter he left us, he loved you and wanted to take responsibility for Nathan, but you had moved away." "Loved?" Patricia gave a bitter laugh. "Nathan, your father didn't love me. He got me pregnant when I was 16 and then disappeared. I never saw him again." Nathan stood up, confused. "But his letters say something different." "What letters?" Olivia showed the letter Anthony had left about Nathan. Patricia read silently, tears streaming down her face. "He says here that he tried to find me," she whispered. "Tried?" asked Nathan. Patricia looked at her son with a guilty expression. "Nathan, there are things I never told you because I wanted to protect you. When I found out I was pregnant, my parents threw me out of the house. I went to live with an aunt in New York. I changed my last name from Parker to Lewis so Anthony wouldn't find me. Why? Because I was afraid of him. Not physically afraid, but afraid that he'd show up, pretend to love me, convince me to go back to the countryside and then abandon me again when he got tired of playing family." Emily moved closer to Patricia. "Ma'am, from what we know of our father, he wasn't that kind of person. He raised us with great love and responsibility." "Maybe he changed," admitted Patricia. "But at the time I was very young and very hurt. I made the decision to raise Nathan alone." "And John Lewis?" asked Daniel. "I met John when Nathan was 3. He knew Nathan wasn't his biological son, but decided to adopt us as family. He was the best father Nathan could have had." Nathan was clearly emotional. "Mum, I always wanted to meet my biological father. You should have told me when I grew up." "Maybe I should have," agreed Patricia. "But as time passed, it became harder and harder. How do you explain to a 15-year-old that the father he hated had actually tried to find him?" Olivia stood up and sat beside Patricia. "Mrs. Patricia, our father passed away 6 months ago. We just found out about Nathan a few days ago. We don't want to fight about who was right or wrong in the past. We just want to get to know our brother and give him the chance to know his roots." Patricia looked at the 2 young women who were the same age she'd been when she met Anthony. "You took care of him all these years." "We did," answered Emily, "and he took care of us. He was the best father we could have had." "And now you want Nathan to go with you?" "We want him to see the farm where we grew up," said Olivia, "to understand where he came from, what his story is. After that, he decides what he wants to do." Patricia looked at her son. "Nathan, what do you want?" "I want to go, Mum. I want to see the place where my father lived, to better understand who he was." "And your job?" "Richard will be furious if you miss the meeting tomorrow." Nathan hesitated for a moment, then looked at Daniel. "Richard destroyed Daniel's life. He's trying to steal my sister's farm. I can't keep working for someone like that." "Nathan, are you sure?" asked Patricia, worried. "That job is your stability." "Mum, today I found out I'm the heir to a farm, that I have 2 sisters who want to meet me, that there's a whole world outside New York that I've never explored. I need to see all of this before deciding what kind of life I want." Patricia hugged her son. "Then go," she said, "but promise you'll come back to tell me everything." "I promise, Mum." "And girls," said Patricia, looking at Emily and Olivia, "take good care of my son. He may not have been raised in the countryside, but he has a good heart." The next morning, Nathan called Richard Wilson to cancel the meeting. "Richard, it's Nathan. I won't be able to make it to the meeting today. A family emergency came up." "What do you mean, what kind of emergency?" "It's personal. No, I can't reschedule for tomorrow. Actually, I'll need to take a few days off." "Richard, please don't shout. I'm just asking for a few days off. What do you mean I might be fired?" "All right, if that's your decision. No, I won't explain what's going on. Goodbye." He hung up the phone and looked at Daniel, Emily, and Olivia, who had overheard the conversation. "I just got fired," he said, but he was smiling. "You don't seem too worried," observed Daniel. "You know what? I'm feeling free for the first time in years. I always felt like something was missing in my life, but I never knew what it was." "And now you know?" "Now I know it was family. Real family." The trip back to the farm was completely different from the way there. Nathan asked 1,000 questions about the property, about life in the countryside, about what Anthony was like as a father. Emily and Olivia took turns telling stories from their childhood, about the hard times, the happy moments, and the dedication Anthony had shown them. "He woke up before the sun every day to tend to the crops," Emily shared, "but he always found time to help us with our studies at night. And when we got sick, he stayed up all night taking care of us," added Olivia. "We never doubted we were loved." Nathan listened to everything in silence, building in his mind the image of a father he had never known. "Did he ever talk about me?" "In recent years, yes," said Olivia. "Especially when he was sick. He said he had a son in New York he didn't know, and that was his biggest regret in life. Did he try to find me? According to the letter, yes. He hired a private investigator a few months ago, but you had recently moved and it was hard to locate you. When they finally arrived at the farm, it was late afternoon. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting a golden light over the entire property. Nathan got out of the car and stood still for a few minutes, simply taking in the landscape. "It's exactly how I imagined it," he said. "What do you mean?" asked Emily. "I always had dreams of a place like this. Wide green spaces, mountains in the background, a wooden house with a porch. I never understood why I dreamed about it, since I've always lived in the city." Olivia smiled. "Maybe it's genetic memory. Daddy used to say the land calls its children back." Daniel watched Nathan's reaction with satisfaction. It was clear the young man felt at home there, even though it was his first visit. "Would you like to see the house?" asked Emily. Over the next 2 hours, the sisters gave a complete guided tour of the property. They showed the main house, the barn where Daniel was living, the sheds, the coffee plantation, the vegetable garden, the orchard where they had found the safe key. Nathan asked questions about everything. He wanted to understand how a farm worked, how to care for the land, how to harvest coffee. "It's a lot of work," he observed. "It is," Emily agreed, "but it's work that gives life meaning. When you plant something and watch it grow, when you harvest what you planted, when you feed people with what you produced, it's a satisfaction that doesn't exist in office work." At dinner, which was prepared by Olivia using ingredients all produced on the farm, Nathan tasted for the first time vegetables he himself had helped harvest from the garden. "This tomato tastes completely different from the ones I buy at the supermarket," he commented. "That's because it was picked ripe today," Olivia explained, "and because it was grown without pesticides, only with natural fertilizer." "You do all this by yourselves?" "Now we have Daniel to help," said Emily, smiling at him. "And if you decide to stay, we could modernize some things, increase production, maybe even develop new products." "What kind of products?" Daniel, who had been quiet for most of the dinner, perked up when talking about his plans. "We could develop our own brand of specialty coffee, partner with coffee shops in Chicago and New York, develop sustainable rural tourism, where city people come to spend weekends here, learning about farming and reconnecting with nature." "Rural tourism?" Nathan became interested. "Exactly. Not the kind of tourism Richard wants to do, which destroys the natural environment, but a tourism that values and preserves the rural way of life, that educates people about sustainable agriculture." Nathan became thoughtful. "Could that be profitable?" "Very," Daniel replied, "especially with the growing movement of people seeking authentic experiences and organic products." After dinner, the four of them sat on the porch to talk under the stars. The country sky was something Nathan had never seen before, thousands of stars visible to the naked eye. "In New York I can only see 3 or 4 stars," he commented. "Here, Daddy taught us all the constellations," said Olivia. "That one there is the Southern Cross. That one is Orion." Nathan spent the rest of the evening listening to the sisters tell more stories about Anthony, about life on the farm, about the challenges they faced to keep everything running. "It can't be easy for 2 young women to handle all this by themselves," he observed. "It isn't," Helena admitted. "Some things are very physically difficult, and there was always the insecurity of not having documents guaranteeing our right to stay here. But now we have the will," said Olivia, "and we have Daniel, and maybe we'll have you too." Nathan looked at the 2 sisters and then at Daniel. "If I decide to stay, would I be an equal partner? 1/3 of the property?" "Exactly," Daniel confirmed. "But it wouldn't just be about receiving money. It would be working together, making decisions together, sharing responsibilities." "I've never worked in agriculture in my life." "We'll teach you," said Emily, "and you can contribute with knowledge we don't have. You understand urban business. You can help us partner with the city." Nathan stood up and went to the porch railing, looking out at the darkness of the property stretching beyond what he could see. "Can I stay a few days before deciding?" "You can stay as long as you want," said Olivia. "And if Richard shows up here?" "We'll face him together," Daniel replied. As if it were a premonition, the next morning 3 black cars appeared on the farm road, kicking up a cloud of dust. Daniel recognized one of the cars immediately. "It's Richard," he said to the other three who were having breakfast on the porch. Nathan stood up, nervous. "He came after me." "He came after all of us," corrected Daniel. The cars stopped in front of the house, and several people got out. Richard Wilson, a 45-year-old man, tall and well-dressed, walked at the front of the group. Behind him were 2 lawyers, a court officer, and 2 private security guards. "Good morning," said Richard, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nathan, what a surprise to find you here." "Richard," replied Nathan, trying to keep his voice steady. "How did you find out where I was?" "You cancelled our important meeting without explanation. It's only natural that I'd be worried about an employee. I mean, such a dedicated former employee." Daniel stood up and went to the porch railing. "Richard, this is private property. If you have any business to discuss, you can speak from right there." "Daniel, my old partner," said Richard, with an ironic tone. "It seems you've secured a new business opportunity. Too bad it will last as short as the previous one." Emily and Olivia moved closer to Daniel and Nathan, forming a united line on the porch. "What do you want, Richard?" asked Emily. "I want to make a final proposal to all of you," replied Richard, signaling for one of the lawyers to approach with a briefcase. "I'm offering $500,000 for this property. It's a very generous amount, which will allow each of you to rebuild your lives comfortably." "We're not interested," said Olivia. "Not even you, Nathan?" asked Richard, looking directly at him. $500,000 divided by 3 is over $160,000 for each, enough for you to buy a better apartment in New York and still have money left to invest." Nathan hesitated for a moment, and Daniel noticed the doubt in his eyes. "Nathan," said Richard, noticing the hesitation, "you found out about your inheritance 2 days ago. Your sisters have taken care of this land for 15 years. They deserve to rest, to live comfortably in the city, not be stuck here working as peasants." "Hey," said Emily, annoyed. "We chose to live here. No one forced us." "You chose because you had no options," Richard countered. "Now you do. You can sell this farm, invest the money, start a business in the city, travel, study. Why limit yourselves to this isolated life in the countryside?" Daniel realized that Richard was being strategic, trying to convince each of them with different arguments. "And you, Daniel," Richard continued, "can use your share to pay off your bankruptcy debts and still have money to start over. Without the risks of farming, without depending on the weather, pests, or market fluctuations." "Richard," said Daniel, "you're offering $500,000 for a property worth at least $2 million. Why do you think anyone would accept this deal?" Richard smiled. "Because I know you have no choice." "What do you mean we have no choice?" The court officer approached and handed an envelope to Daniel. "Notification from the district attorney's office," he said. "This property is being investigated for environmental contamination of the springs. You have 15 days to prove that you are not polluting the region's groundwater, or the farm will be shut down." Emily took the document from Daniel's hands and read it quickly. "This is a lie," she said. "Our farm is organic. We don't use pesticides or chemicals." "The district attorney's office doesn't investigate based on lies," said Richard. "Someone made a substantiated complaint with technical evidence." Daniel immediately understood what was happening. "You filed the complaint, didn't you?" he accused. "Me? I'm just a citizen concerned about the region's environment." Nathan, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Richard, you planned all this from the beginning, didn't you?" "He found out I was the heir to the farm, kept me close to manipulate me when convenient." "Nathan, you're confused. Your sisters are filling your head with conspiracy theories." "They're not theories," Nathan retorted. "You destroyed Daniel's company, forced the bankruptcy that brought him here. You arranged or influenced the irregular auction of the farm, hired investigators to dig up information about me, and now you're using public agencies to force the sale." Richard seemed irritated at being exposed. "Nathan, you're too smart to be swayed by sentimentality. This farm will be mine one way or another. You can sell now and profit, or lose everything and end up with legal debts." "What if we refuse?" asked Olivia. "Then in 15 days, when you can't prove the farm isn't contaminating the springs, because I guarantee you won't be able to, the property will be shut down by the district attorney's office. After that, it'll be very easy to buy it at a judicial auction for much less than $500,000. Daniel felt a wave of hatred toward Richard, but tried to stay calm. "Richard, you haven't changed at all. You're still the same unscrupulous person I met 5 years ago. And you're still the same naive person who believed in me for 5 years," Richard shot back. "The difference is now I have enough resources and influence to get what I want." "Get off our property," said Emily, her voice firm. "We're leaving," said Richard, signaling his group to withdraw. "But think carefully about the offer. 15 days pass quickly, and after that there will be no more negotiation." After Richard's cars left, the four stood on the porch in silence, absorbing the impact of the threats. "What are we going to do?" asked Olivia. Daniel picked up the district attorney's office notification and read it carefully. "The complaint alleges we're contaminating 3 springs with pesticides and chemical fertilizers," he said. "To prove this is false, we need technical reports on the water and soil." "How much does that cost?" "Several tens of thousands of dollars," replied Daniel, "and it takes at least 10 days to be ready." "We don't have that money," said Emily. Nathan, who had remained quiet, approached the group. "I have some savings," he said. "I can pay for the reports." "Nathan, are you sure?" asked Olivia. "It's a lot of money." "I'm sure. Richard manipulated me for months, maybe years, used information about my family for his own interests. I won't let him win now." Daniel looked at Nathan with admiration. "Even if you pay for the reports, we still need a reliable laboratory and a lawyer specialized in environmental law." "I know an excellent lawyer in Chicago," said Emily. "He defended a neighboring farm in a similar situation 2 years ago." "What about the laboratory?" asked Olivia. "It needs to be a laboratory accredited by the district attorney's office," explained Daniel. "Otherwise, they won't accept the results." Nathan took out his phone. "I'll call a college friend who works at an environmental consulting firm. Maybe he can recommend the best laboratory." They spent the rest of the morning making calls, researching laboratories, contacting lawyers. The situation was complex, but not impossible to resolve. It was during lunch that Olivia had an idea. "What if we file a counter-complaint?" she suggested. "How so?" asked Daniel. "If Richard is using public agencies to harm us based on false information, isn't that a crime?" Daniel stopped eating. "Daniel, Olivia, you might be right. Filing false reports with environmental agencies is a crime. If we can prove Richard knew the information was false, how would we prove that?" Nathan became animated. "I worked at his company for 2 years. I have access to emails, documents, conversations that could serve as evidence." "Nathan, this could be dangerous for you," warned Emily. "If Richard finds out you're collaborating against him." "Emily, Richard already fired me. He's already made threats against our family. He's already tried to destroy our farm. I have nothing left to lose, and we have a lot to gain." Daniel reflected on the possibilities. If we can prove that Richard made a false report, he could face criminal charges, and that would invalidate the entire district attorney's office investigation. "Besides," added Nathan, "I can sue him for manipulation and breach of employment contract. After all, he fired me without just cause after discovering insider information about my inheritance." Olivia got up from the table, excited. "Then let's do it. Let's turn the tables against Richard." "It won't be easy," warned Daniel. "He has money, powerful lawyers, political influence. We only have the truth and determination." "Sometimes that's enough," said Emily. Nathan opened the laptop again. "I'll start by searching for emails and documents that could serve as evidence. Richard was always careless with digital security, trusted his employees too much. They spent the afternoon organizing a legal strategy. Daniel contacted some lawyers he knew from Chicago. Emily called the attorney specializing in environmental law. Olivia researched accredited laboratories. Nathan, meanwhile, scoured digital files from Richard's company, looking for evidence that could connect him to the false report. "I found something interesting," said Nathan late in the afternoon. "The emails between Richard and an environmental consulting firm from 2 weeks ago. They were discussing strategies to accelerate rural property acquisition in 3 Rivers. "Does that prove anything?" asked Daniel. "By itself, no, but it's another piece of the puzzle. If we get more evidence, it could form a pattern of criminal behavior." Emily brought fresh coffee for the group. The attorney I contacted said he can meet with us tomorrow morning in Chicago, she informed, and that cases like this with suspected false reports are usually a priority for the district attorney's office. Is that good for us? Asked Olivia. Very good, replied Daniel. It means if we get convincing evidence, the investigation against Richard could be faster than the one against us. Nathan closed the laptop and stretched. You know something? Regardless of what happens to Richard, I've already made my decision about the farm. Everyone looked at him expectantly. I want to stay. I want to be part of this family, this land, this life you've built here. Emily and Olivia smiled and hugged their brother simultaneously. Are you sure? Asked Emily. Life here is very different from the city. I'm sure, replied Nathan. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in the right place with the right people, doing the right thing. Daniel approached the group. Then we're officially a family now, he said, and families defend each other. Exactly, agreed Olivia. Richard will find out he messed with the wrong family. The next morning, everyone headed to Chicago for the meeting with the attorney. The office was in a central area of the city, in a modern commercial building. Dr. Richard Morris was a man of about 50, experienced in environmental law, with a good reputation in the region. After hearing the whole story, he went straight to the point. You have a solid case to challenge the report, but we need to be strategic. Richard clearly has resources and influence, so we need to be impeccable in our actions. Where do we start, Miss Daniel? First, we hire the technical reports immediately. I'll recommend a laboratory that has absolute credibility with the district attorney's office. Second, we've organized all the evidence Nathan gathered about Richard's activities. We're going to build a complete dossier on his fraudulent practices. Nathan handed over a folder with printed documents. Here are all the emails, contracts, and suspicious documents I managed to collect. Dr. Richard examined the material quickly. Very good. This is already enough to file a complaint against Richard for cartel formation and public auction manipulation. What about the false environmental complaint? Asked Olivia. For that, we need more direct evidence. Someone who heard Richard confess that he filed the complaint knowing it was false, or documents proving he knew about the farm's organic farming. Emily remembered something. The men who showed up at the farm claiming to be from the water and sewer company, they took photos of our property without authorization. Interesting, said Dr. Richard. If we can prove those men worked for Richard, we have evidence of espionage and trespassing. How do we prove that? Nathan, do you have access to Richard's company payment records? I have access to the basic financial system. I can check if there were payments to private investigation firms or environmental consulting companies in recent weeks. Dr. Richard stood up and went to a shelf full of legal books. Do you know Richard might be committing several crimes besides the false complaint? He said. What crimes? Cartel formation, public auction manipulation, corporate espionage, coercion, threats. If we can prove all this, he could get up to 8 years in prison. Daniel became excited at the possibility. And how long does this kind of process take? If we have solid evidence, it could be relatively quick. Maybe 6 months for the criminal complaint, a year for the trial. But what about the 15 days we have to respond to the environmental notification? We'll handle that first, assured Dr. Richard. I'll file a request to suspend the investigation based on suspicion of a false complaint. If we can substantiate it well, the judge may suspend everything until we resolve the main issue. They left the lawyer's office with a clear action plan and, for the first time in days, real hope of defeating Richard. On the way back to the farm, they stopped at the lab recommended by Dr. Richard. It was a company specialized in environmental analysis with national and international certifications. The responsible technician explained they would need to collect water samples from the farm's 3 springs and soil samples from various points on the property. The results will be ready in 1 week, he informed, and if there really is no contamination, the reports will be conclusive. How much does it cost? Asked Nathan. $25,000 for the complete package. Nathan didn't hesitate. You can start tomorrow. Back at the farm, they found an unpleasant surprise. There were 2 strangers walking around the property near the springs. Daniel quickly parked the car, and the 4 ran toward the intruders. Hey! Shouted Emily. Who are you? "And what are you doing here?" The two men, dressed in camouflage clothing and carrying equipment, approached. "We're from the Environmental Research Institute," said one of them, showing a badge. "We're conducting a survey of the region's water quality." "By whose order?" asked Daniel. "The district attorney's office. It's an official investigation." Nathan approached and examined the man's badge. "This institute doesn't exist," he said. "I worked with urban development. I know all the official environmental research agencies." The two men exchanged nervous glances. "Look here, folks," said the second man. "We're just doing our job." "What job?" insisted Olivia. "Show us the official order that authorizes you to enter our property." "We don't need an order for an environmental investigation." "Yes, you do," interrupted Daniel. "And you're going to leave our property now, or we'll call the police." The two men quickly began gathering their equipment. "You're obstructing an official investigation," said one of them, trying to maintain authority. "You're committing trespassing on private property," retorted Emily. After the fake investigators left, Nathan took out his phone and photographed the license plate of the car they drove away in. "I'll note the plate and look up who it belongs to," he said. "Richard really doesn't give up," observed Olivia. "Now he's sending people to fabricate evidence on our farm." Daniel was thoughtful. "Actually, this could be great for us," he said. "How so?" "If we can prove that Richard sent people to plant false evidence on our farm, we have him committing several federal crimes." Emily clapped her hands. "Let's set a trap for him," she suggested. "How?" "We'll pretend we're willing to negotiate. We call Richard for a meeting here at the farm, record everything, and let him incriminate himself." Daniel liked the idea. If Richard thinks he's winning, he might let his guard down and confess things he shouldn't. Nathan opened his laptop. "I can call him now, pretending I'm worried about the environmental investigation and wanting to negotiate." "It's risky," warned Olivia. "If he suspects anything, he could become even more dangerous." "Or he might feel so confident that he confesses everything," countered Daniel. Nathan dialed Richard's number. "Richard, it's Nathan. I'm at the farm with my sisters. We're worried about this environmental investigation story. What do you mean you expected me to call? Can you come here to talk in person? Tomorrow morning is fine, at 10 o'clock? Okay, see you tomorrow." He hung up and looked at the other three. "He's coming tomorrow, and from his voice he's very confident. He said he expected me to call." "We have one night to prepare everything," said Daniel. Olivia stood up. "I'll prepare a special dinner tonight. If this is going to be our last night of uncertainty, at least we'll eat well." While Olivia cooked, Daniel, Emily, and Nathan planned how to record the conversation with Richard without him noticing. "We have to be careful," said Emily. "If he finds out we're recording, he could use it against us legally." "Nathan can use his phone," suggested Daniel. As his former employee, it would be natural for him to record the conversation to protect himself. "What if he asks to see if I'm recording?" "We'll use two phones," said Emily. "One visible, that you show him if he asks, and another hidden doing the actual recording." Nathan liked the idea. "And what kind of questions should I ask to get him to incriminate himself?" "Let him talk," advised Daniel. "The more he talks, the more chances he has to contradict himself or confess something compromising." At dinner, Olivia had prepared a feast with free-range chicken, creamy polenta, garden salad, homemade dulce de leche, and special farm coffee. "If Richard gets our farm, he'll destroy all this," she said, pointing to the food. "He'll end 15 years of organic farming to build a luxury resort." "He won't succeed," affirmed Nathan. "Tomorrow we get the evidence we need to finish him once and for all." Daniel raised his coffee cup. "A toast," he said, "to our family, to our land, and to the justice we'll achieve tomorrow." "To family," the other three replied in unison. That night, Daniel had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. He had arrived at the farm as a defeated man, fleeing bankruptcy and humiliation. Now he felt part of a family, had a purpose in life, and a real chance to get revenge on Richard. At 6 in the morning, he was awakened by voices in the main house's kitchen. Emily and Olivia were already up preparing breakfast. "Nervous?" asked Daniel, entering the kitchen. "Anxious," corrected Emily. "Today we find out if we can save our farm." Nathan came down the stairs, already dressed and with 2 cell phones in hand. I tested the recorders, he said. They're working perfectly. At 9 o'clock in the morning, they began positioning themselves for Richard's arrival. Olivia would stay in the kitchen, seemingly doing household chores but attentive to everything. Emily would position herself in the orchard, tending to the plants but close enough to hear the conversation. Daniel would be in the barn, out of sight but ready to act if necessary. Nathan would receive Richard alone on the porch, projecting confidence and willingness to negotiate. At 10 o'clock sharp, Richard arrived. This time, he came alone, just with his black car. "Nathan," he said, climbing the porch steps with a confident smile. "Smart of you to call. Let's resolve this like civilized people." "Richard, I'm concerned about this environmental investigation," began Nathan, following the agreed script. "I didn't know you were contaminating the springs." Richard sat in a rocking chair, clearly comfortable. "Nathan, you're too smart to believe that," he said, laughing. "Obviously, there's no real contamination." Nathan felt his heart race. Richard had confessed that he knew the complaint was false. "What do you mean, no real contamination?" "My dear, I organized that complaint myself. I needed a legal way to force the sale of the farm, and environmental issues are always effective." Nathan could hardly believe Richard was confessing everything so easily. "But isn't that a crime?" Richard shrugged. "Crime is a strong word, it's business strategy. All great entrepreneurs do it." "And the men who came here yesterday posing as environmental investigators?" "My employees," admitted Richard without hesitation. "I needed to verify the actual condition of the property before making the final offer." Nathan continued pressing. "Richard, since when did you know I was an heir to this farm?" "About 4 months ago," replied Richard. "I hired an investigator to find out about possible heirs when I started taking an interest in the property. It was a pleasant surprise to discover one of the heirs worked for me." "And that's why you kept me in the company?" "Of course. It was very convenient to have you close, to be able to influence your decisions about the inheritance when the time came." Nathan was shocked by Richard's coldness. "And if I had decided to keep the farm from the start?" Richard smiled disturbingly. "Nathan, I always get what I want. If you didn't cooperate voluntarily, I would find other means to persuade you." "What means?" "Well, you had a stable job, a finance department, a comfortable life in New York. It would be a shame if legal or financial problems complicated your situation." Nathan understood that Richard was openly threatening him. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm being practical. Daniel already knows how I work. When I want something, I get it. The question is whether you'll make the process easier or make it more unpleasant for everyone involved." Nathan decided to risk a more direct question. "Richard, what if we prove you made a false complaint? What if we get evidence of all the crimes you committed to acquire this farm?" Richard laughed loudly. "Nathan, do you think I got where I am by being careless? All my activities are technically legal. I may have sped up some processes, influenced some decisions, but always within the law." "And the fraudulent bankruptcy you forced against Daniel?" "Daniel was naive. He trusted me without checking the documents he signed. Technically, he authorized all the operations that led to the company's bankruptcy." Nathan felt disgusted by the person who had been his boss for 2 years. "Don't you feel any remorse for destroying people's lives?" "Nathan, in business, there's no room for sentimentality. I identify opportunities and take them. If some people get hurt in the process, it's because they didn't know how to protect themselves properly. And my sisters, they dedicated 15 years of their lives taking care of this land. Your sisters can use the compensation to start a new life. $300,000 each is a lot of money for 2 young women from the countryside." Nathan realized Richard had lowered the offer from $500,000 to $300,000 during the conversation. "Yesterday you said $500,000. "Circumstances have changed," said Richard coldly. "The environmental investigation reduced the property's market value. $300,000 is a fair offer, considering the legal problems you'll face. And if we refuse?" Richard got up from his chair and went to the porch railing. "Nathan, look around. This is an isolated property, far from everything. Your sisters are 2 young women alone. Accidents can happen in the countryside. Problems with electricity, with water, with security. Nathan felt a chill. Richard was threatening his sister's physical safety. "Are you threatening our safety?" "I'm warning about the risks of living isolated in the countryside," said Richard, keeping his tone casual. "It would be a shame if something happened to your new family." Nathan decided there was enough information recorded. He needed to end the conversation before Richard became suspicious. "Richard, I'll talk to Emily and Olivia about your proposal. We'll give you an answer by tomorrow." "Excellent," said Richard, heading back to his car. "But remember, tomorrow is the final deadline. After that, the conditions might be very different." After Richard left, Nathan ran inside the house where Daniel, Emily, and Olivia were waiting anxiously. "We did it!" shouted Nathan. "He confessed everything." Daniel couldn't believe it. Everything. That he organized the false environmental complaint, that he hired investigators to invade our property, that he knew about my inheritance for months and kept me at the company to manipulate me, that forced the fraudulent bankruptcy of your company. And he even threatened our physical safety, added Olivia, who had heard everything from the kitchen. Emily clapped her hands, euphoric. "We've got Richard in our hands." Daniel took Nathan's phones and checked the quality of the recordings. "Perfect," he said. "The audio quality is excellent. Dr. Richard will be very happy with this material." Nathan sat in a chair, still processing everything he had heard. "I worked for 2 years for that person," he said. "How could I have been so blind?" "Nathan, Richard is a professional manipulator," comforted Emily. "Many people fall for his lies." "The important thing is that now we know exactly who he is," added Olivia, "and we have evidence to destroy all his plans." Daniel was excited, but remained cautious. "We need to be strategic about how we use these recordings," he said. "If we hand everything over to Dr. Richard today, he can start the criminal process against Richard immediately." "And the environmental investigation against us?" "With these confessions, Dr. Richard can suspend the investigation within 24 hours. Nathan stood up. "Then let's go to Chicago right now. I want to see Richard's face when he gets the notification that he's being criminally charged." On the trip to Chicago, they listened to the recordings again, identifying each crime Richard had confessed to. Dr. Richard received them immediately when he learned they had important evidence. After listening to the complete recordings, he was clearly impressed. "This is better than I expected," he said. Richard confessed to at least 6 federal crimes in a 20-minute conversation. Which crimes specifically? False accusation, cartel formation, corporate espionage, threats, coercion, business fraud. With this evidence, I can get his preventive arrest today. Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. Today? Yes. Crimes of this nature, with recorded confession and flight risk, justify preventive arrest. I'm going straight to the district attorney's office with this material. Nathan asked about the timelines. And how long can Richard remain in jail? If convicted of all these crimes, he could get between 12 and 15 years in prison. Emily and Olivia hugged, emotional. "Finally, Justice," said Olivia. Dr. Richard quickly organized all the documents. "You can return to the farm," he said. "Tomorrow morning Richard will be arrested, and the environmental investigation against you will be suspended." "Are you sure it will work?" asked Daniel. "With evidence like this, it's impossible to go wrong." Richard dug his own grave. Back at the farm, the 4 celebrated on the porch with a special dinner and the best wine they could find at the city market. "A toast," said Daniel, "to Richard Wilson, who was foolish enough to confess all his crimes on a recording." "To Richard," the others replied, laughing. Emily stood up. "And a toast to our farm, which is finally safe." "To our farm," they repeated. Nathan looked at the 2 sisters and Daniel. "And a toast to the family I never had and now will never lose." "To the family," they all said together. The next morning, Daniel was awakened by the sound of Nathan's phone ringing. It was still very early, barely dawn. A few minutes later, Nathan appeared at the barn door with a strange expression on his face. "Daniel, you need to see this," he said, showing his phone. On the screen was a news story from a local news site. "Businessman Richard Wilson arrested in operation against business fraud and environmental crimes." Daniel quickly read the news. Richard had been arrested at 6 in the morning at his home in Chicago. Along with him, 2 partners and 3 employees involved in the fraudulent schemes were arrested. "It worked," said Daniel, still not fully believing it. Emily and Olivia came running from the main house. "Did you see the news?" shouted Emily, excited. "We just saw," replied Nathan. "Richard is in jail." Olivia danced with joy on the porch. "Our farm is saved. Our family is saved." Dr. Richard called an hour later to officially confirm. "The environmental investigation against you has been officially suspended," he informed. "And Richard has been charged with 8 different crimes. He'll remain in jail for at least 6 months until the trial." "And his assets?" asked Daniel. "They're under investigation. It's likely they were acquired with money from criminal activities. If proven, you may be entitled to significant compensation." Daniel thought about the possibilities. "Can I recover the money he stole from me in the bankruptcy?" "Most likely, yes. And the losses you suffered due to the threats and problems he caused can also be compensated." After hanging up, the 4 sat on the porch to absorb everything that had happened. "It's over," said Emily. "It's really over." "Not only is it over, but we won," added Olivia. "Richard will pay for everything he did." Nathan looked at the farm landscape he had only known for a week. "You know something," he said. "Even if Richard had offered $5 million for the farm, I wouldn't have sold it." "Why?" asked Daniel. "Because here I found something no money can buy. A real family, a place where I belong, a purpose in life." Emily got emotional. "Nathan, I was so worried you would leave." "I'm never leaving," he said, hugging both sisters. "This is my home now." Daniel stood up and went to the porch railing, looking at the property that had become much more than just his new home. "Do you know what the irony of this whole story is?" he said. "What?" "Richard thought he was destroying me when he forced my company into bankruptcy. Actually, he freed me from a life that didn't make me happy and brought me here, where I found a family and a true purpose." Olivia smiled. "Dad always said the land has a way of calling back those who belong to it." Nathan brightened with a thought. "And now that Richard is in jail, we can develop our plans for the farm without rush or pressure." "What plans?" asked Emily. Daniel had already thought about this. "First, we modernize the coffee production and expand to other organic products. Second, we develop the sustainable rural tourism we talked about. Third, we create a cooperative with the neighboring farms to strengthen the entire region." "That's going to be a lot of work," observed Olivia. "We're 4 determined people," said Nathan, "and now we have our whole lives ahead of us to make this work." 2 weeks later, the technical reports from the lab arrived, confirming that the farm not only didn't contaminate the springs, but had one of the purest waters in the region. Dr. Richard used these reports as additional evidence against Richard, definitively proving that the environmental complaint had been made based on false information. 1 month after Richard's arrest, the first compensation arrived, $200,000 for the moral damages caused by the harassment and threats. Daniel decided to invest the entire amount in modernizing the farm. "This money came from Richard's malice," he said. "Let's use it to create something good and positive." They bought new equipment for coffee processing, renovated the barns, installed a modern and sustainable irrigation system. Nathan enrolled in a correspondence course on organic agriculture and discovered he had a natural talent for working the land. "I think this is really in the blood," he commented to the sisters after managing to save a tomato crop that was having problems. Emily and Olivia started developing new products, artisanal jams, homemade breads, cheeses made with milk from the farm's cow. Daniel used his business knowledge to create a website for the farm and establish partnerships with coffee shops and restaurants in Chicago. 6 months later, the farm was completely transformed. Production had tripled, they had a waiting list of people wanting to visit for rural tourism, and the family income was much higher than what any of them had earned before. More important than the financial success, however, was the happiness everyone felt. Daniel woke up every day excited to work. There was no more stress, anxiety, or feeling of emptiness. He had a family, a purpose, and a life that made sense. Nathan had become an expert in sustainable agriculture and led the farm's technological improvements. More than that, he had found the inner peace he had been searching for years. Emily and Olivia saw the farm prosper in a way they had never imagined. They had financial security, recognition for the work they did, and for the first time, a complete family. It was on one of those special mornings working on the farm that Daniel noticed something different in the way he looked at Emily. She was tending to the vegetable garden, her hair tied in a ponytail, a smudge of dirt on her face, smiling as she explained something about composting to a group of tourists. Daniel realized he had fallen in love with her. It wasn't just gratitude that she had accepted the partnership. It wasn't just admiration for the hard work she did. It was genuine love for the brave, intelligent, and caring woman she was. For weeks, Daniel was torn about whether or not to confess his feelings. He was afraid of complicating the harmony of the family they had built. It was Olivia who noticed first. "Daniel," she said one afternoon when they were alone organizing the coffee harvest, "you're in love with my sister." Daniel blushed. "Is it that obvious?" "To me it is. You two look at each other differently, and she's in love with you too." "Emily is? How do you know?" "I've been her twin sister for 34 years. I know when she's in love." "What should I do?" Olivia smiled. "Tell her, of course. Life has already given us so many good surprises. Why not one more?" That night, Daniel invited Emily for a walk through the orchard after dinner. It was a full moon night, and the property was bathed in a magical silvery light. "Emily," Daniel began when they stopped under the century-old jaboticaba tree where they had found the safe key. "I need to tell you something." "I know," said Emily, smiling. "You love me and I love you too." Daniel was surprised. "You know?" "Daniel, we've lived on the same property for months. We work together every day. We've built a family together. It was impossible not to notice that what we feel for each other is much more than friendship or partnership." Daniel moved closer to her. "I'm afraid of complicating our family, our partnership." Emily interrupted him with a kiss. "Daniel, our family will only get stronger. And as for our partnership, well, partnership between husband and wife is the oldest form of partnership in the world." "Husband and wife?" "It's a marriage proposal," said Emily, laughing. Daniel hugged her and lifted her off the ground, spinning under the jaboticaba tree. "It's a yes," he replied. Nathan and Olivia came running from the other side of the orchard. "Finally," shouted Nathan, "we've been waiting for weeks for you two to make up your minds." "Waiting?" asked Daniel. "Daniel," said Olivia, "do you think we didn't notice the looks you two gave each other? The excuses to be alone, the way you cared for each other?" Emily laughed. "I guess we were pretty obvious." "The important thing," said Nathan, "is that our family is now truly complete." The wedding took place 3 months later, in a simple ceremony in the farm's orchard. Only close family and friends from the area attended. Patricia, Nathan's mother, came from New York to see the farm and her daughters-in-law. She stayed for a week and fell in love with country life. "I think I'm going to move to Three Rivers," she told Nathan. "I want to be close to my new family." "That would be wonderful, Mom." Dr. Richard was the best man. During the ceremony, he shared news that made the celebration even more joyful. "Daniel," he said in his speech, "I'm pleased to inform you that Richard Wilson has been sentenced to 12 years in prison, and you will be entitled to a final compensation of $800,000 for the damages he caused." The party lasted until dawn, with country music, food from the farm itself, and many stories about the journey that had brought everyone there. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. 1 year after the wedding, Emily was pregnant with the couple's first child. "Will it be a boy or a girl?" asked Nathan, excited at the prospect of being an uncle. "We don't know yet," replied Daniel, "but regardless, he'll be raised here on the farm, getting to know the land, learning the value of honest work." Olivia had also found love. She started dating John, the son of a neighboring farmer who had become a partner in the cooperative they'd created. The cooperative already included 15 farms from the region and had become a reference for sustainable agriculture in Virginia. The farm's agritourism welcomed over 200 people monthly who came to learn about organic farming processes and enjoy the tranquility of country life. Daniel had written a book about his experience. From Concrete to Soil, How I Lost Everything in the City and Found Life in the Countryside. The book became a bestseller among people dreaming of radical life changes. Nathan had become a recognized speaker about sustainable agriculture and rural cooperatives. He traveled across the country, sharing the farm's story and teaching other communities how to organize. 5 years after Daniel's arrival at the farm, they received a state government award as Best Example of Sustainable Rural Development. During the award ceremony, Daniel was invited to give a speech. 5 years ago, he said before hundreds of people, I was a bankrupt businessman, fleeing the city after losing everything. I arrived at this farm thinking I was just buying a piece of land to restart my life. In truth, I had bought much more than that. I had bought a family, a purpose, a life with real meaning. Richard Wilson thought he was destroying me when he forced my company into bankruptcy. In reality, he gave me the greatest gift of my life. He brought me home. Because this farm, this family, this life we've built together, this is what it truly means to be home. I learned that family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's commitment. It's love turned into daily actions. I learned that land isn't just property. It's responsibility. It's connection to something greater than ourselves. And I learned that success isn't measured only in money. It's measured in peace, in purpose, in relationships that make us better people. This farm taught me that sometimes we lose everything to discover what truly matters, and that when we discover what truly matters, we never lose anything truly valuable again. When Daniel finished his speech, the audience rose in prolonged applause. Emily, who was in the front row with their small son in her lap, had tears in her eyes. Nathan and Olivia, seated beside their mother, Patricia, who had permanently moved to the region, smiled proudly at the brother and brother-in-law he had become. That evening, back at the farm, the family gathered on the porch for the ritual that had become tradition, talking about the day while drinking coffee and watching the stars. "You know," said Daniel, "today marks exactly 5 years since I first arrived here." 5 years, repeated Emily. "It feels like a whole lifetime." "It feels like several lifetimes," corrected Nathan. "The life I had in New York, the life you had before meeting me, the life Daniel had before Richard destroyed everything. All those different lives that came together to create this new life we have now." Olivia rocked her grandson in her lap. "And to think that if Richard hadn't done all those wicked things, none of this would have happened." "It's ironic," agreed Daniel. "His wickedness ended up generating so many good things." Patricia, who now lived in a small house they'd built for her near the main house, joined the group. "You know what I think," she said. "I think your father, Nathan, somehow planned all this." "How so, Mother?" "He left clues for you to find each other. He left the will the way he did." She chose not to tell about Nathan during her life so the discovery would happen at the right time. Emily reflected on Patricia's words. "Sometimes I feel like Dad is still here taking care of us," she said. "He is," affirmed Olivia. "Every time we harvest coffee from the land he planted, every time we use the knowledge he taught us, every time we make decisions based on the values he passed on, he is here." Daniel looked at the family that had formed around him and felt immense gratitude. "Do you know what the most amazing thing about this whole story is?" he said. "What?" everyone asked. "It started as a tragedy. Richard robbed me, humiliated me, destroyed my company. I arrived here defeated, without prospects, just wanting to escape from everything. And ended as a complete victory. Not only did I recover everything I had lost, but I gained much more than I ever had before." Nathan stood up and went to serve more coffee for everyone. "Do you know why it worked?" he said. "Because when we hit rock bottom, the only possible direction is up. And because we faced everything together," added Emily. "Alone, each of us would have been destroyed by Richard. Together we managed to destroy him." Olivia placed the little grandson in the cradle that always stayed on the porch during the family's nightly conversations. "And because we never gave up fighting for what was right," she said, "even when it seemed impossible to win." Patricia smiled at the children and sons-in-law she had gained. "You built something very beautiful here," she said. "A real family, a prosperous business, a life with meaning. Anthony would be very proud." Daniel stood up and went to the porch railing, looking at the property illuminated by the moon. Sometimes I still can't believe all of this is real, he said. That this life is my life. Emily approached and held his hand. It is real, she said, and it's ours. We built it together, defended it together, and we'll continue building it together for the rest of our lives. Nathan approached the couple. And we'll teach our children to value all of this, he said. To understand that family is the most important thing in the world, that land is a responsibility, that honest work is dignity. Olivia joined the group. And that sometimes life breaks us to rebuild us stronger, she said. That sometimes we lose everything to discover what's truly worth it. Patricia approached the four. And that love always wins in the end, she said. It might take time, it might be hard, but love always wins. That night, before everyone retired to their rooms, Daniel made one last reflection. Do you know what I would like to say to Richard, if he were still free? He said. What? Everyone asked. Thank you. Thank you? Nathan was surprised. Thank you for forcing me out of my comfort zone. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for helping me find you. Thank you for teaching me that real life isn't in the things we accumulate, but in the people we love. Emily hugged her husband. Daniel, you're amazing, she said. To feel gratitude for someone who tried to destroy your life. Emily, Richard thought he was destroying me. Actually, he freed me. He freed me from a superficial life and brought me to a life with meaning. Nathan reflected on his brother-in-law's words. It's interesting how the bad things in life sometimes lead us to the good things, he said. That's why we can never give up, said Olivia, because we never know when today's tragedy will turn into tomorrow's blessing. 7 years after Daniel's arrival at the farm, the family had grown even more. Daniel and Emily had 3 children, Anthony in honor of the grandfather, Mary in honor of the grandmother that Nathan had never known, and Peter, who had been born the previous year. Nathan had married Anna, an agronomist who came to the farm as a consultant and ended up staying. They had 2 daughters, Emily, named after Nathan's sister, and Olivia, named after his other sister. Olivia had married John, and they had a son, Daniel, named after the brother-in-law who had helped save the farm. The farm had expanded. They bought neighboring properties that were being sold and created a sustainable agriculture complex that employed more than 50 people from the region. Rural tourism had evolved into an environmental education center that hosted schools and universities from across the country. Daniel had opened a sustainable rural development consultancy and helped communities throughout Brazil organize cooperatives and projects similar to theirs. Nathan had become a university professor of sustainable agriculture and continued traveling across the country, giving lectures and consultations. Emily and Olivia had created a brand of organic products that was sold in supermarkets in several cities and had become a benchmark for quality. Patricia, at 65, had become the official matriarch of the family and was responsible for taking care of all the grandchildren while the parents worked. The story of the farm had spread. It became a television documentary, was the subject of reports in national magazines, and inspired other families to attempt similar life changes. More important than the external recognition, however, was the happiness that the whole family felt. The children grew up free, safe, connected with nature and with solid values. The adults had work that made sense, solid relationships, and a clear life purpose. The property had become an example that it is possible to prosper economically without destroying the environment, that it is possible to succeed in business while maintaining human values, that it is possible to build true wealth based on relationships and not just money. One Sunday afternoon, 10 years after Daniel's arrival at the farm, the whole family was gathered in the orchard for a celebration barbecue. It was the birthday of Anthony, the eldest son of Daniel and Emily, who was turning 8. During the party, Anthony approached his father. "Daddy," said the boy, "Grandma Patricia told a story about you and Uncle Nathan and the aunts. Is it true that you almost lost our farm?" Daniel looked at his son, thinking about the best way to explain the whole complex story to an 8-year-old. "It's true, Anthony," he said. "But do you know what I learned from that?" "What?" "I learned that we never really lose anything important when we have a real family. Because a real family fights together, protects each other, never gives up. And is ours a real family? Daniel looked around, seeing Emily organizing the table with the aunts, Nathan playing with the cousins, Patricia telling stories to the younger children, Olivia and John preparing the meat on the barbecue. Ours is the most real family I know, Anthony. Then we'll never lose our farm. Daniel hugged his son. Never. This farm will be yours when you grow up, and your cousins, and your children's. It will be our families forever. Promise? I promise. That night, after the children had gone to sleep and the adults were chatting on the porch, Daniel reflected out loud. Have you ever thought what our life would be like if I had sold the farm to Richard that first day? He said. Our life would be completely different, replied Emily. We probably wouldn't even be together today. I'd still be working for Richard in New York, said Nathan. Not knowing I had sisters, not knowing this life. We would be lost somewhere, said Olivia. Without family, without prospects, without a place to call home. Daniel shook his head. It's scary to think how small decisions can change everything, Corey, he said. The decision not to sell wasn't small, corrected Emily. It was one of the biggest decisions of our lives. Nathan perked up with a thought. You know what I think will happen to Richard when he gets out of prison? He said. What? Everyone asked. I think he'll have learned his lesson. I think he'll understand that the way he lived wasn't leading anywhere good. Nathan, you're too optimistic, said Olivia. Richard is a bad person. I don't know if there are bad people, reflected Nathan. I think there are lost people, people who make wrong choices, people who haven't found a true purpose in life yet. Daniel liked his brother-in-law's reflection. Maybe you're right, he said. Maybe Richard is just someone who never had what we have, a real family, a place to call home, work that makes sense. Emily doubted it. You're being too generous with Richard, she said. He had every opportunity in life and chose to hurt people. But now he's had 7 years in prison to reflect on his choices, argued Nathan. Sometimes we need to lose everything to appreciate what really matters. Olivia remembered something. Dr. Richard told me that Richard lost his entire fortune paying compensations and lawyers. When he gets out of prison, he'll be in the same situation Daniel was when he arrived here, without money, without prospects, needing to start over from scratch. Daniel reflected on that information. And maybe that's his chance to truly start over, he said, to build a life based on the right values this time. Would you give Richard a second chance? Asked Patricia, who had been listening to the conversation in silence. Everyone looked at each other, considering the question. If he came here showing true remorse, began Emily. If he was willing to work honestly to contribute to the community instead of exploiting it, continued Nathan. If he showed he really changed, added Olivia. Daniel completed the thought. Then yes, we would give him a second chance, because that's what this land gave me. A second chance. And that's what you gave me. A second chance to have a family. Even after everything he did, insisted Patricia. Especially after everything he did, replied Daniel. Because if we manage to turn his evil into something good, maybe we can help him turn into someone good too. Nathan smiled at his brother-in-law. Daniel, you've changed a lot in these 10 years, he said. How so? When you arrived here, you were full of anger, resentment, and a desire for revenge. Now you're talking about giving a second chance to the man who destroyed your life. Daniel reflected on the observation. This land taught me that holding on to anger is like holding on to poison, he said. It hurts us more than the people we're angry at. Emily approached her husband. And it taught us that forgiveness isn't forgetting what happened, she said. It's choosing not to let what happened control our future. Olivia got excited about the direction of the conversation. Imagine if Richard really changed and came to work with us, she said. Knowing the business like he does, he could help us expand our cooperative even more. Olivia, exclaimed Emily, you can't be serious. Why not? Defended Olivia. Jesus forgave the soldiers who crucified him. Why can't we forgive Richard? Nathan got excited about his sister's idea. Actually, it makes sense, he said. Richard knows the urban market, has contacts, understands marketing. If he really changed, he could be very useful for our projects. Daniel shook his head, smiling. "You're all crazy," he said. "But maybe that's exactly the kind of craziness the world needs." "What kind of craziness?" "The madness of believing people can change. The madness of giving second chances, even when they're not deserved. The madness of turning enemies into family." Patricia stood up. "Well," she said, "if you're truly willing to forgive Richard, then I am too. After all, he was responsible for bringing my son into this family." Emily sighed. "All right," she said. "If Richard comes here showing genuine remorse and willingness to change, we'll give him a chance." "But with conditions," added Olivia. "He starts from the bottom, as a regular employee. He has to prove he's changed before earning trust. And he has to live in the city, not here on the farm," said Nathan. "At least at first, until we prove we can trust him." Daniel agreed with all the conditions. "And if he tries anything suspicious even once, he never gets a second chance," he said. "Agreed," they all said. 3 years later, Richard was released from prison. Dr. Richard called Daniel on the day of his release. "Richard was let out this morning," he informed. "According to the information I have, he really lost everything. He has no money, no place to live, no job." "How is he?" asked Daniel. "According to the prison warden, he's completely changed. He spent the last few years reading, studying, doing volunteer work inside the prison. He seems genuinely remorseful." Daniel shared the news with the family during dinner. "What if he comes looking for you?" asked Patricia. "We'll receive him," said Emily, "but with caution." They didn't have to wait long. 1 week after being freed, Richard showed up at the farm. He was completely different. Thin, greying hair, simple clothes. There was no trace of his former arrogant air. Daniel met him at the gate. "Richard," he said, without hostility in his voice. "Daniel," replied Richard with a humble voice, "can I speak with you and your family?" "Come in." On the porch, Richard sat in the same chair where he had confessed all his crimes 10 years earlier, but now his posture was completely different. "I don't know where to begin," he said, with a broken voice. "You have every right to throw me out of here, to not want to hear me." "We're listening," said Emily. "I spent 10 years reflecting on everything I did," said Richard. "About the people I hurt, the lives I destroyed, the evil I spread in the world." Nathan, who had been the biggest victim of Richard's manipulation, approached. "And did you reach any conclusion?" "I did. The conclusion that I was an empty, lost person, trying to fill the inner void with money and power, and that I only managed to fill that void when I lost everything and was forced to look inside myself." Olivia remained skeptical. "And what do you want from us now?" "Forgiveness," Richard said simply. "And if possible, a chance to prove I can be a different person." Daniel studied Richard's face. He seemed sincere, but it was hard to be sure. "Richard, do you realize the damage you caused in our lives?" he asked. "I fully realize," replied Richard. "And I realize that words aren't enough to fix what I did. That's why I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." "How?" "By working, honestly. For you, if you'll have me, or for anyone willing to give me a chance. I don't want to be the boss anymore. I don't want to order anyone around. I just want to work and try to rebuild my dignity." Emily was surprised by the change in Richard's attitude. "Do you have a place to live?" she asked. "No, I'm in a shelter in 3 Rivers, but I can manage." Nathan stood up. "Richard, you completely destroyed my trust in you," he said. "But I'm willing to give you a chance to rebuild that trust, if you've really changed." "How?" "Come work with us, starting from the bottom as a regular employee. If you prove you've changed, you can take on bigger responsibilities." Richard began to cry. Would you give me work, even after everything?" Daniel approached. "Richard, this land has taught us that everyone deserves a second chance," he said. "If you've truly changed, we want to help you rebuild your life. But with conditions," Emily added. "You'll work as an employee. You'll receive a salary like any other employee. You'll live in town, not here, and at the first sign of dishonesty, you're out forever." "I accept all the conditions," said Richard, still crying. "I just want the chance to prove I can be a good person." Patricia, who had observed the entire conversation in silence, approached Richard. "Son," she said, using a maternal tone, "we've all made mistakes in life. What matters isn't never making mistakes, but learning from them and becoming a better person. Richard looked at the woman who treated him with kindness even after all he had done. "Do you forgive me?" "I forgive you," said Patricia, "and I'll pray that you can forgive yourself too." Richard started working at the farm the next day. He began with the simplest tasks, cleaning the barns, caring for the animals, working in the garden. He never complained, always arrived early, always volunteered for overtime. Gradually, the family realized that Richard's change was genuine. He lived in a small rented room in Three Rivers, came to the farm by bicycle every day, brought lunch he made himself. In the first weeks, he barely spoke to anyone beyond what was necessary for work. He seemed ashamed of his past and afraid that people wouldn't believe in his change, but as he gained confidence, he began to show that he still had valuable business knowledge. It was Richard who suggested expanding the online sales of the farm's products. It was Richard who identified partnership opportunities with supermarket chains. It was Richard who developed marketing strategies that tripled the rural tourism sales, always being humble, always asking for permission, always putting the family's interests above his own. 6 months after starting work at the farm, Daniel called him for a private conversation. "Richard, you've really changed," he said. "We can all see that." "Thank you, Daniel. These have been the 6 happiest months of my life." "Why?" "Because for the first time I'm doing something that really matters. I'm contributing to something bigger than myself. I'm surrounded by people who treat me with respect, even after everything I did." Daniel reflected on Richard's words. "Do you want to be part of this family officially?" he asked. Richard didn't understand. "What do you mean?" "We want to offer you a small share in the farm. Not as an heir, but as a minority partner. 3% of the business, which you can buy with the work you've been doing." Richard was shocked. You trust me that much?" "We do, but it comes with responsibilities. You'll be in charge of the entire commercial area of the farm, marketing, sales, partnerships. And if you ever become dishonest again, you lose everything and never get another chance." Richard knelt right there on the porch and began to cry. "Daniel, I don't deserve this," he said. "It's not about deserving," Daniel replied, helping Richard to his feet. "It's about second chances. It's about forgiveness. It's about family." "Family?" "Richard, you're going to be a partner in this farm. You'll work with us every day. You'll participate in important decisions. You'll be part of our life. That makes you part of our family." That evening, the family gathered on the porch to formalize Richard's entry as a minority partner. "Richard," said Emily, "welcome to the family." "Welcome," repeated Nathan, Olivia, and Patricia. Richard looked at the people he had tried to destroy and who now welcomed him as family. "You taught me the true meaning of Christianity," he said. "Unconditional forgiveness, love for one's neighbor, second chances for those who make mistakes." "We learned that from this land," said Olivia. "The land teaches patience, forgiveness, renewal. Every harvest is a new chance to start over." Nathan approached Richard. "And now you're going to learn that too," he said. "You'll learn that family is stronger than any problem, that honest work brings more satisfaction than any dishonest wealth, that having purpose in life is worth more than having money in the bank." Richard smiled. "I'm already learning," he said. Daniel stood up. "So now we're officially 6 partners," he said. "Daniel, Emily, Nathan, Olivia, Richard, and—" he looked at Patricia. "And Ms. Patricia, who is our moral and spiritual partner." Patricia laughed. "At 70 years old, I become a partner in a farm," she said. "Life really surprises us. End of story. And now tell us, what did you think of this journey of overcoming, forgiveness, and second chances? Do you believe that people like Richard can truly change? And would you give a second chance to someone who hurt you? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. We really want to know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.